Jesse had a fighting chance, and he beat this for quite a while because he knew it was an issue for him.
Yes.
And he wanted help.
He did.
I mean, so that seems like that's one thing that you can do. And the other thing is to communicate. In a lot of families, nobody talks to anybody.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what it is when you're a teenager is you don't want to be different than the other kids. Like, you know, I've had deep discussions with Jesse, Nancy's Jesse, and he didn't want to be different than all his friends and have to go to meetings and have to go to treatment. And, you know, they start to feel like, what's wrong with me? My son the same. You know, like I'm 20 years old. Why can't I go out and drink like everybody else? And it's hard to accept that when you're 19, 20 years old.
And my son
it
didn't.
really is.
He didn't go out.
They feel like something's wrong with them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with them. It's a physical
No, and every kid's
allergy.
different. If you have acne, hey, you know what?
Yeah.
That you have acne. Or if you have something wrong with your eye, or if you have
Yeah.
mitral valve prolapse in your heart, or you have a problem, you know, or you're born a certain way with some physical or emotional or whatever it is,
Right.
you have to, you know, if you have allergies or asthma, maybe you can't be on the track team.
But
Or
it's a social, you know.
it's a stigma.
Yes.
It's a social stigma. And I think some of it is that, I don't know how it is now, but when I was in school, it was it was kind of like the opposite of it. It was cool to do a lot of drinking and a lot of using drugs. And hey,
still is.
what are those pills? I'll take some of those. You know, I'll let you know what those are.
The good news is that the adolescent community is getting together and finding a little more acceptance in the recovery thing. But that my son still struggles with wanting to go hang out and drink. And, you know, he smokes a little pot, and then it goes to the drink, and then it goes to the Xanax, and whatever else goes on that I don't know about. But one leads into the other, always. And because they want to fit in, and they want to be a part of, and they don't want to feel different. And like you said, you know, if you have acne, you got to treat the acne. Well, I'll keep trying to explain to him, when you drink alcohol, you know, you set off something in your body that he or
chain
she
reaction.
may not. Right. Like, you know, they can drink, Jesse. You can't. You know, that's hard to accept. He's still struggling with it. Makes me nervous.
Right.
You know,
Staying away from that first drink is probably really hard, but staying away from the second one, forget about it. Once they
is
take the first
impossible.
one. Yeah.
it's not going to happen once you put the first one in.
Yeah. For someone who is an addict or someone who has this disease. And I think that it's one thing that's getting better, and you know, well, one thing that does seem to be getting better, there seems to be a little bit more awareness of it and acceptance of it as a disease, and among younger people also, that there seems to be, like, you can be cool and be clean.
Yes. And
I
then we
hope
have
so.
the issue of the insurance companies, because I heard you say, you know, they're recognizing this as a disease, and they are, to a point.
To a point.
It's not
Then they should pay
really
for it.
fully treated as a disease because, you know, I brought my son to detox for alcohol and Xanax, and they took his blood and then they send it into the insurance company, and the doctor for the insurance company decides whether or not he goes into detox. And that's about checking his levels of how much Xanax is in his system. Xanax, you have to detox, medically detox off of, but they decide, there's not enough in his system, so send him home. Send him home.
Jesse was
No.
sent home once on heroin. On heroin.
Yeah.
They said his vitals are fine. You could just bring him home.
Right.
I was praying they would send him to a rehab.
Well, I'm sure these are wonderful doctors. If they're working for an insurance
Insurance
company, it
company.
seems that they have a vested interest in spending as little money as possible.
That's right. That's right. And I don't think that they treat this as a disease. Not yet. I hope they will.
I think publicly they do. How much I think there's also,
There's a criteria, though.
you can't spend more than this, and if you only have
That's right.
such and such amount of Xanax, and we'll send them for 6 days, but not 10, or, you know, that kind of thing. That in that gray area.
Like
Best
10 days in a rehab? Really? 'Cause-
My Jesse only got 5.
Yeah. 10, 5, 3.
Right.
You know, who makes that determination?
Somebody. someone whose job it is to make those determinations. And are they working for Jesse or Jesse? Or are they working for an insurance? Who are they working for,
The
really?
managed care.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's pressure on those people to handle these things a certain way. I'm sure they hear from higher up somewhere.
Because they can't look at it, if it's a doctor, they can't look at this and go, okay, this kid only needs 2 days. You know, how do you, really? So this doctor at the hospital's looking at it and says, okay, he needs detox. And then the doctor at the insurance company says, no. It's the same
That's
piece of paper. What's different is that they work for the insurance company.
Right. So this is a problem. I just want to say this is a problem that grew out of the fact that it is recognized. I mean, years ago they didn't have anything.
Right.
You were gone, and now they have stuff, but there's this war that goes on about spending money or not spending money, and you're playing with someone's life. So money, please. Why does money come into it? Do you know what I mean?
Our insurance company, we had a 30-day inpatient coverage. 30 days inpatient. So when he
So
got
rehab,
to the
30
fifth
days.
day, the 5th day, I was absolutely beside myself that they weren't going to pay for anymore. They said it's, like I said, not medically necessary. I could not afford to keep him there. And most of the rehabs that you hear about all these people going to, they're 20 grand a month.
Yeah.
They're big money making businesses.
Right.
They don't care about your kid unless you have the money
That's
to
right.
pay for them.
That's a problem. And things like, one of the things that can help at the beginning, if you don't have the willingness and you don't admit you have a problem, is an intervention. You know, but there are professionals who do interventions, also very expensive.
Very expensive.
Very expensive. Now, families can get around and do them, and that might work, it might not work. We're not necessarily recommending that. We're not medical people here. We're just people, we're just parents. All 3 of us are parents of kids the same age. But that's expensive. So how does society deal with that? You know, we talk about it. The disease affects rich and poor. The treatment, not quite as democratic. There's better
I
treatment.
was so desperate in June to find my son a place to go. Desperate. That I wrote the President of the United States. I never got a response. I wrote Eric Clapton, hoping that he'd let my son go to his retreat, his rehab in wherever it is. It's on an island. I wrote that big famous rehab in Malibu, California. Never got an answer. I was desperate.
And I'll bet they get a lot of these letters. I mean,
I was desperate,
Yeah.
begging anybody for help. And this, you know, it's the disease itself is
Their worst state.
emotionally draining, financially draining, and just heartbreak. It's heartbreak. And any kid that's out there that's using, you know, or adult, just think about your family before you put something in your body, because the pain that you're going to leave your family with is just unbearable. It's I'm still numb. I'm numb, and my heart's broken. As a mom who thinks I did everything possible that I could have done for my son, it wasn't enough, you know. And I know in NA and in the 12 steps they say you're powerless. And I was powerless over his disease as he was powerless over his disease. And that's sad that, you know, that people could get so addicted that you can't help them anymore. That there comes a fine line where you can't help them. And
so for those of you out there who might be struggling or might think you could possibly have a problem, there is hope. There are treatments. There are 12-step fellowships whose contact information we are running on the bottom of the screen and on the sides of the screen. There is a fund in Jesse's name at Seafield, and we're taking all the sponsorship money, all of it, from this program and from the program we're going to be doing with Seafield, and we're donating it to that fund at Seafield. And just one last thing, I want to read. We're not affiliated, other than the fact that we're donating this money to Seafield. We're not affiliated with Seafield. We're an independent media organization. We're not affiliated with any 12-step fellowships either, they cannot be affiliated with anyone. But I do want to read something in case you are struggling or a family member or possibly a child is struggling. Here is, this is a pamphlet called Am I an Addict? And it's put out by NA, Narcotics Anonymous. And I'm going to read it. And I'll also put it up on the screen. Only you can answer this question. This may not be an easy thing to do. All through our usage, we told ourselves, I can handle it. Even if this was true in the beginning, it is not so now. The drugs handled us. The drugs handled us. We live to use and use to live. Very simply, an addict is a person whose life is controlled by drugs. Perhaps you admit you have a problem with drugs, but don't consider yourself an addict. All of us have preconceived ideas about what an addict is. There's nothing shameful about being an addict once you begin to take positive action. If you can identify with our problems, you may be able to identify with our solution. The following questions were written by recovering addicts in Narcotics Anonymous. And by the way, we're not suggesting that you go to Narcotics Anonymous or AA. There's all kinds of fellowships out there where we're suggesting that you find help somehow, some way. Prayer is good too. If you have doubts about whether or not you're an addict, take a few moments to read the questions below and answer them as honestly as you can. These are all yes or no questions. 1. Do you ever use alone? 2. Have you ever substituted one drug for another, thinking that one particular drug was the problem? 3. Have you ever manipulated or lied to a doctor to obtain prescription drugs? 4. Have you ever stolen drugs or stolen to obtain drugs? 5. Do you regularly use a drug when you wake up or when you go to bed? 6. Have you ever taken one drug to overcome the effects of another? 7. Do you avoid people or places that do not approve of you using drugs? 8. Have you ever used a drug without knowing what it was or what it could do to you? 9. Has your job or school performance ever suffered from the effects of your drug use? 10. Have you ever been arrested as a result of using drugs? 11. Have you ever lied about what or how much you use? 12. Do you put the purchase of drugs ahead of your financial responsibilities? 13. Have you ever tried to stop or control your using? 14. Have you ever been in a jail, hospital, or drug rehabilitation center because of your using? 15. Does using interfere with your sleeping or eating? 16. Does the thought of running out of drugs terrify you? 17. Do you feel it is impossible for you to live without drugs? 18. Do you ever question your own sanity? 19. Is your drug use making life at home unhappy? 20. Have you ever thought you couldn't fit in or have a good time without drugs? 21. Have you ever felt defensive, guilty, or ashamed about your using? 22. Do you think a lot about drugs? 23. Have you had irrational or indefinable fears? 24. Has using affected your sexual relationships? 25. Have you ever taken drugs you didn't prefer? 26. Have you ever used drugs because of emotional pain or stress? 27. Have you ever overdosed on any drugs? 28. Do you continue to use despite negative consequences? 29. Do you think you might have a drug problem? Think about it.